Okay, so hello everyone. This is, or rather should I say hello early birds, because it seems like only people that woke up really early managed to get here today, but we're happy to have you and share our story with you. But before I jump into the story, let's maybe get some of the things straight. In our everyday work as designers, in the field that we know, there are certain truths or things we know to be true. And one of them is that creating or design process is never a linear line. Most often than not, we never go such easy from the idea to actual implementation. More often than not, it actually looks more like this. So we get from a moment of a lot of chaos, uncertainty, more questions than answers, or how one of my favorite writers likes to say it, we go for a very creative process of panic, and hope. And at the hope at the end of this process, we have some clarity and solution we want to implement. And this is one of the truths we're sharing with our clients, with our stakeholders. We keep reminding them that creating a product, building solutions is not a marathon, it's a sprint.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, sorry. It is a marathon, not a sprint, sorry. And in these cases, we know that more often than not, hardly ever anyone gets it right the first time. So this is why we create things, we iterate, we do them anew, we toss some of them out, try again, in order for us to get, in this marathon, closer to user and client needs. And this is all great and fine if you want to tell that again to clients, stakeholders, friends, startups. But then you might come up with your own idea and think you want to implement as a designer. And let me just tell you that, in theory, things might seem simple, but when it comes to your own projects, we can all agree that sometimes it's not as easy to actually put them into practice. Because what happens, at least for me, perfectionism creeps in. I start to overthink the things I want to do. I grow emotionally attached, although we don't always want to admit it, to the solutions or ideas I have. And who is actually to prioritize what am I to do if actually the person creating the thing is me, myself, and I? And I've been doing that, or I had a problem of doing that, more times than I can actually admit or would want to admit. And don't get me wrong, I really understand. I'm literally going to grow a little human before I finish my own personal website. So this is basically what happens. So today, what we would like to do is to share with you our journey of the last 5 years of no-coding a product one iteration at a time, with the hope that that would make your life easier and maybe the journey that you can embark on a little less frustrating and maybe a little more smooth. So I'm Alexandra.
I'm Natalie.
And we're the co-founders of DareIT. DareIT is an organization that over the last year has, or years, have impacted thousands of people into entering the IT industry. How we're doing that is we're running a nationwide mentoring program together with many different educational activities that help people to switch careers. And of course, as part of that, the core of everything we do, we also run a very engaged community of supportive tech experts and beginners.
We're able to do all of that, well, thanks to very extensive no-code and automation tech stack, which you see here, which allows us to do all those things, first as a team of actually just Alexandra and me, and initially even as a side project, and then to growing it to a small team of up to 5 people. Of course, we didn't just start working with this tech stack from day one. It has been a process with a lot of learning, with a lot of fuck-ups, with a lot of going down rabbit holes, things that we wish we knew before. So what we want to share with you today is 10 tips of things we've learned along the way and experiences we've gathered that hopefully will help you to get started building and to, well, build this out. As we have worked with no-code tools, as we have learned about them, we've really learned to see the power of them. And I can say I've definitely fallen in love with these tools. So to say the least, we're big fans. That's why we also decided to share our knowledge of using these tools. And to be honest, we've also been asked many questions. How do I get started? How does it even work? Which is why earlier this year we also started the No Code Makers program, which in essence is an educational or online course to learn about no code and actually build your own product. Now, I know for myself that making that first step, getting started, is really hard. Ola shared her perspective of the things that get in her way. My list is probably very similar: perfectionism, overthinking, a lot of things happening, and mostly it has to do with wanting to do everything at once. So what we want to share in the next few tips is what has worked well for us and what we use as guidelines to get started, and how we got started in the first place, and how we actually start new product features or new products in the first, as a first step. And the first tip or the first learning experience we had was to always start with a pain point or a problem to solve. This is how we started with Dare IT in the first place. It's not that we said, oh, we've heard about these awesome no-code tools, let's find a place or a reason to use them. It was more about thinking, okay, what's the problem we want to solve? Awesome no-code tools are a great way to get there. So when we started, this was our starting point, and this is something that we very often go back to, or always go back to: what's the problem we're trying to solve?
And one of the first problems that was very apparent to us when starting initially with this very grassroots, ad hoc, unofficial initiative is how to communicate better. Because again, as we started in a very small way, the only place where we gathered our ever-growing community was actually just a very simple Facebook group. And we all know what are some of the limitations of these kinds of environments if we're trying to foster them.
The other problem we were facing a little bit more behind the scenes was like, how can we scale our activities? How can we bring more impact? And what do I mean by that? When we first started the first editions of the mentoring program of Dare IT, which is how we got started, we essentially were oversubscribed, and that's probably an understatement, because we were receiving at least 2,000 applications for 100 spots of mentees. We would have loved to expand those spaces and help more people, but we were just simply limited. Again, it was the two of us. We were, doing this on the side, and a lot of manual processes were happening. And so we asked ourselves, well, what can we do to do more and to help more people, and how can we use, essentially, technology to help us do that?
And in order not to get, as you know, or as we know, for us at least, it happens too much into our head and try to get everything perfect from the start, we figured, okay, what is the smallest, simplest feature we go for first, or we could start with? And as a reminder, in terms of the Facebook group, of course, it served its purpose to a certain point, but as we really grew in scale, our needs actually outgrew the tool. It became more and more difficult for us to communicate all kinds of different activities that we were doing, all kinds of offering, etc. So we had a choice. A choice that's basically, let's call it, on two spectrum of choices in this context. So on one hand, we could stay with a ready solution at that point that was Facebook, that we already knew didn't fulfill our needs. It did a job, but not to the full extent. Or we could go on the other side of the spectrum and create a custom product or a custom platform. And as you can imagine, we could definitely not afford doing that, both in terms of money and in terms of time. But to our luck, at that point, so around 5 years ago, the no-code tool started to gain more and more popularity. So actually what happened for us, no-code, and at that time Webflow as the first tool we got into, became this, let's call it, a sweet spot of solutions, because it had, definitely was cheaper. It allowed us to build something ourselves without external help. It also had a low entry barrier, which means that it also allowed us to speed up things. And we said, okay, great, let's try it out then.
And we were able to customize much more than using Facebook.
Yes, that's also true. But then, as you can imagine, being a designer, of course, when you think about creating something for yourself, you want to have the most beautiful website, you want to have the most comprehensive design, you want to geek out on the sitemaps and what not. But again, with the notion of trying to pace stuff ourselves and thinking about the simplest thing, we did something that I'm still embarrassed about, being a very quick one-pager.
I confirm she didn't want to put this on display today. I could not do that to show it to designers.
5 years ago, people. One-pager that served its purpose, allowed us to showcase all of our activities and start dabbling into the world of no-code, and at that time, Webflow.
Stepping back behind the scenes into our problem of scaling our program. So I said, yes, we wanted to invite more mentees to our program, and we were limited by the 2 of us. What does that actually mean? You might think, well, we had a goal, let's at least double the amount of people we could get in. You might think, well, 200 people, maybe it's not that hard to manage. But 200 mentees mean 200 mentors, some additional consultants, partners, friends, family. You end up, or we ended up with at least 500 people to support with the 2 of us. Of course, we work in IT, so it's not like we were drafting this or doing this all with pen and paper. We were using our set of tools. You heard about the Facebook group. We were using Google Sheets to help us do one of the most important steps of this program. And maybe let me take a step back. Why am I talking about this process? We said, what is hindering us from going to this scale? What's our biggest bottleneck? And essentially what we identified is that matching mentors with mentees, and essentially the one point where so many people are engaged, this is a real bottleneck for a lot of people involved. And we were using Google Sheets, and anyone who was part of the program at the time still remembers the Google Sheet. I mean, I still have nightmares about this sheet, because imagine 200 people working on the same time on this, adjusting columns, adjusting filters. Let's say there was a lot of goodwill by our mentors towards us, and a lot of patience to allow for this. Well, so we decided, let's start with this very simple step, let's automate it, let's make it better, and then, yeah, let's go. And essentially what came to be was our first automation implementation using Airtable. At the time, it was 2020, and this is a little screenshot of that. It was very simple, but it was such a nice upgrade compared to our Google Sheet, and I know from our mentors, they loved it. So we defined this small part first, which then made actually very big impact to allowing us to achieve our goal. All right, so we figured what's the problem we want to solve. We defined the kind of micro MVP, as we like to call it, of how we're going to solve that. The next question is, or for us always was, okay, so how are we going to do that? Which tool are we going to use? We'd already settled on no-code tools, as Ola mentioned, because of the advantages, but of course we needed to choose a tech stack. That was us before and during the process of choosing our tool. At the time, no-code tools were coming out, so there was a lot of information on the internet, but it was extremely scattered, so it took a lot of going down very weird forums and alleys to kind of gather the information. But in essence, what we did as a proper software builder's mindset, designer and product manager, we drafted out our process, we defined what are the features we needed, and what are must-haves, should-haves, etc., etc. And then we essentially said, okay, these are the tools. I don't want to go into details. You probably all have chosen tools yourself, so you know how to do that. But the thing I want to tell you is that our specific point was, let's choose one tool. There are a lot of tools, but let's find the one tool that matches most of the things we want to have. And that's what we went with. Of course, a few slides ago, you saw all our tech stack and all the tools we use to deliver all the functionalities. Now we have our go-to set of tools that we use on a daily basis, and we don't need to go and check out the internet for all the things we want to do anymore. And we wanted to actually share that with you. This is the tech stack that works very well for us, with a little asterisk that, of course, this depends very much on the use case. So that works for us. For you, maybe something else will work. And with a note that we did start with the first two tools, and then from there we expanded. Why is that? every new tool, new learning, new complexity, etc. So it was hard at times to say, okay, let's just focus on this and let's just take the functionalities for this, but it definitely helped us. And one more note, and one of the things that I'm very, very happy and grateful about, 4 years forward, the no-code community has evolved a lot. Now you have such things as, we call them aggregators, I don't know if they're called aggregators, but such places like Join Secret, where you essentially have a whole overview of a lot of different no-code tools by use cases, and you even get a little discount, or you can get credits for those. So this is a really awesome development that we still use today on a daily basis.
Okay, so we went through identifying the pain point, we choose the simplest feature, we went through the process of choosing a tech stack. Hopefully the process for you, it will be way easier because you can either use the little cheat sheet that we can propose, because that's also one of the industry standards for many of the use cases, or you can dabble into Join Secret and see what it is that we would like to start with. But we can't stress enough the importance of the leverage it gave us to start as soon as possible. And what I mean by start is not actually over-theorize, read out too much, etc. Of course, that is important. Everyone has different learning habits, so to speak. But get your hands dirty as soon as possible. And again, I can't stress this enough because over the course of us sharing the knowledge, or even other designers coming to us and talking about no-code or wanting to acquire this knowledge and automation, we keep hearing one of the obstacles as if, but I'm not an expert. And the newsflash is that you really don't need to be a Webflow developer, not from the start or not even ever. You don't need to become an automation wizard, a Zapier master, Oracle of all-knowing, etc. You just need to start like with every other element. It's easiest when you find a simple use case. It's great if you choose one tool that sparks your interest, or as Marie Kondo says, sparks joy, and just really get into it. And this will bring not only, hopefully, on your end as well, satisfaction and joy, but there are so many different resources and tools you can start with in order to leverage your process.
And that we also use.
And that we also keep on using for the last 5 years in our journey. So as an example, templates. In Webflow, you have so many different available templates divided into different use cases, sectors, e-commerce, marketing, portfolios, whatnot, that you can have a look, start with, and basically start building your first website. You don't have to really build automation from scratch in the beginning. Again, you have many amazing templates from Airtable or Make that you can not only use for different use cases, but also get inspired and actually understand the possibilities of different tools to be used. Or maybe there are certain things that you like more than others. So let's say, okay, you say, I'm not that really interested into building something from scratch in Webflow, but I actually really like styling. You can go for Realm libraries, use ready components, not worry that much, let's say, about responsive design and all the interactions, and actually make your website look nice and make it spark with some of the other libraries available. So this goes on and on up to a point where you can also go for, let's say, supercharged templates, like as an example, Circle, that solves very concrete problems that you might have. And it really doesn't stop there. There are many solutions available, and also there are many tools that we are still using that are great, again, not only to start, but also to speed up your work and make it more efficient.
Ola talked about perfectionism in the beginning. I know, as I mentioned, I'm guilty of striving forward to that. And this is one of the things that I need to keep in check when working with no-code, to be honest. I love no-code, and I think you'll figure that by the end of the presentation, because I'll repeat that. But I'm, of course, also aware of its limitations. And one of those is that yes, you have a lot of possibilities, but sometimes you're not exactly able to replicate one-to-one what you want to build without maybe some elements of code. So it has happened several times that I've got stuck in my head, no, but that's exactly what I want to do, trying to find workarounds. But in all the times, it has never gotten me very far, and the things that has worked best is to remind myself, or often Ola comes in, what do we need to do? And to think about it's better to have it out there and done and to cover the, well, good enough, then have it perfect. And one of the fun things about doing that as part of no code is that it requires some creative thinking at times. What do I mean by that? And to show you an example. So at some point in time, we wanted to introduce installment payments for our products. The first step, or the kind of obvious thing to go to, was to go to our payment tool that we're using, Stripe. Big fan, by the way, awesome tool. And we started to look into what are the options. It turned out that it's quite complex to implement installment payments using Stripe. It did require some coding. Not that we didn't want to code, but we're like, is it really worth to go and build such a comprehensive thing? It's just going to take a lot of time. Second option, to go again to the other end of the spectrum, is to go for a little bit more of a, let's say, out-of-the-box solution or defined solution. In this case, we looked into PayPal. But frankly speaking, for us, it was too expensive for what we were going to get from it. So for a moment, we're like, oh, shoot, what are we going to do? And what we effectively we did some creative thinking or some creative Googling and letting Google and the community do some creative thinking. And we figured that, hey, why don't we use EasyCart? EasyCart, by the way, is a tool built on top of Stripe. And let's use their subscription functionality to make it look like installment payments. It's not one-to-one, but for an MVP, for getting it out right, as we talked about micro MVP, it will be good enough. If we run into problems, we can always change it later on. Spoiler alert, this was 2 years ago. We're still using this workflow because it's been doing more than enough of the job that we intended it to do. And it saved us so much time, and as mentioned, we had it out there done better than perfect.
So as we got to the point where we got out of our heads, believed that we don't have to be experts in automation, we don't have to do all the certificates first. Actually, between of us, I mean, we don't even have certificates, let's say, in automation expertise, and we've been able to build amazing things. It's more important to actually start doing things and choose done over perfect. Great advice always. But as we, let's say, conquer this first step, whenever we're creating something, there's always this next part, which is actually about improvement. And this improvement should be, of course, continuous. And we also know that the fundamental of this element is actually iteration. So going from one solution to another, to another, to another, as a never-ending process in a way, in order to make it as good as possible. But then there might be another obstacle. We might want to be prone to do everything, everywhere, at the same time, and sometimes, again, too many ideas, too many priorities. So one of the best approaches that worked for us is to trying to think of it as a spider web and trying to expand like a spider web without actually getting entangled in one. So with iterating gradually, as you already know, we had the infamous Excel sheet. We turned it into a great Airtable automation. We made the improvement better. This was our first building block. And from there, we actually started slowly building an ecosystem of other elements and adding more components into the web that could help.
So from this very core element, we then moved into using no-code tools and automations for having a better recruitment process for mentees and mentors, for automating some communication and emails and stuff that we were previously doing manually, to improving our cooperation with partners, reminding about things, collecting information. From there, we went further. We organized a lot of events. Anyone who's organized events knows there's a lot of stuff happening there. So we started to, use no-code tools and automation to help us do that better for our users, which effectively ended up in this whole system allowing us to run our mentoring program. And that we in turn used to then offer or launch a new product offering, the Dare IT Challenges, which are practice-based online courses, essentially. And from there, we took what we built for the mentoring program, and we started to introduce, for instance, payments. And not only did we increase or build our product offering, we automated our business in the meantime. And first of all, we learned in the process, like a spider web, so that could be a map of our skills, actually. And what was a grassroots initiative in the beginning grew into a full-blown business and organization at the same time as our infrastructure. So the spider web maybe seems like an obvious thing to look at now at the end. It's like, yeah, of course, this is all the things that you're going to build. but it's also a scary thing. So this has helped us to go from what we started with and to really expand and to use the blocks and to use the advantages of no code, of implementing things fast and to kind of crawl around without getting tangled, of course, and building this whole setup using no code and automation.
But of course, as our infrastructure progresses, it's also important to remember it's never a situation where we have one element, we add new components, we build out the spider web, and then we basically forget about each and every single step. It's important to always get into this continuous building in small steps, also within each of the building blocks. So Natalie mentioned that one of the big things that came for us in the different product offering was payments. And let's just agree, it started with the most basic thing. You had one product with one price, presented in a static way on a very static website, and that was everything we started with. And of course, as the infrastructure, as the product, as the business model grew, we started, thanks to no-code, introducing also multiple options for products with multiple packaging variants, which could introduce certain, let's say, customization options and a bigger offering and opportunities to our community. And then, as we built this element up, we started playing with different variables. What are the other things that we could tweak to make the experience better or maybe make some of the things more approachable? And this is where the installments came in with some of the new tools that we found in order to make that happen. So again, gradual building on small, let's say, ideas, elevated over time, and again, perfected within this whole big spider web of different solutions, interactions, and tools that we are using.
And of course, you might think like, oh, well, that's the same thing you do if you're custom coding your solution. You also iterate, you build them step and step. Yes, of course. The advantage with no code is that the little steps that we showed you about adding new products, etc., can be done in 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 clicks, and in a day you can ship it and get it out. So this idea of small steps is really something that you can do every single day and get it out into production. We've heard a lot about the advantages of no code, again, big fans, but one of the things you will also learn about or hear if you're reading about no code, it democratizes, well, software development. What does it actually mean? It's such a big word. What it has done for us, it has really empowered our whole team. So as mentioned, first it was Aleksandra and myself, so it was two of us. And thanks to these tools, we were able to do more and do it better, and with the two of us. Of course, at some point, we did extend our team up to five people, so we had 3 more, who all joined us actually with no knowledge about no-code and automation tools, and who over time, actually quite quickly, grew into sort of experts or users themselves, so that now it's not just the 2 of us who are doing this, building this. We have 5 people who are able to develop, implement, bring in their ideas and really take on their responsibility and be independent creators. Not because they spent 3 years learning a certain kind of skills, but they learned over months, and we essentially taught them. So from a perspective of a creator also, you might know this feeling like, okay, you want to change something in the product, and you have this idea and you need to submit it to the dev team, or you need to have a ticket, you need to wait, there's a bottleneck, you never know when it's going to happen. And with this no-code setup, in our case, it was really like, I have an idea, I want to implement it, I can do it. Here we go. We have a lot of creativity that is going out there in the world because of that.
And I would say also a lot of potential took from all the team in order to empower them. Of course, still, even though we were a team of 5, we still, each of us have our own areas that we like to focus on more in certain devices. For example, for me, that's everything visual and front-end, and that's, let's say, one tech stack we can use. For Natalie, it's more of a, let's say, back-end approach.
Automation for the win.
And love and automation. So that, of course, differs, and that's fine. Everyone can play to their strengths, but what's most important for us is that we can really enhance this collaborative element. Because again, one of the things we hear about advantages of no-code is, okay, it's cheaper, lower entry barrier, you can have more flexibility, you can iterate quicker, you can have this engagement of the whole team, so you can create in a more collaborative way. But there's also one more thing that's very important to remember that also goes very well in line in our everyday work as designers. So we are very much used to prototyping, to testing our concepts, to validate whatever assumptions there are, and often than not, see if that works, and sometimes say, okay, it works great, or it doesn't, and we need to start anew. And this is exactly the idea or the mindset we would like you to, that worked for us best when we were creating our products, to keep it in mind, not fall into this cost-sunk fallacy that we've spent so much time developing something, we need to stick with it because it's just hard to let go. And it really worked to our advantage to know when to just scrape something all together, start rebuilding it anew, and just make the next step, just as you would do with any types of prototyping and iterating your products. And one of the best examples of that I could show you is how we approach building our educational platform. So in the beginning, it was the simplest imaginable way you could think of. So basically, we had SendGrid, which is an email sending tool. SendGrid was automated thanks to our table, let's say, options. And what we did is we basically sent out the content of the course via email, and the email had a link to Notion where we kept the course. Super simple, maybe embarrassing at some point, but it really did the job.
Not very safe, since a lot of people could get access.
A lot of mistakes, okay, but it really did the job, and it was the first iteration of the product, and it really worked in the beginning. But as the product grew, as our understanding of user needs grew, we've also realized, okay, we need to go for something that could encourage this cohort-based community experience, learning with others, giving more feedback, being vocal, meeting other participants of the courses. So we were missing this community aspect. So we decided, okay, we didn't have much remorse about throwing away everything we did in the first iteration, and we moved the whole program to Circle. It's a community-based platform that supported a lot of the needs that we were looking for. And again, this worked like a charm for the longest time. It supported all the use cases that I've mentioned just now. But a couple of years ago, at that time, we ran into a problem that we wanted to expand. Again, our spider web was growing. And we ran into problems that we couldn't introduce more automations to Circle because at that time, the platform wasn't supporting them. Of course, now we're in the situation where everything made such progress that if we were to join Circle now, probably we would stay with it because all the features that we were missing and integrations back then now are available. But it was some time ago we decided to make a switch. As another problem or challenge that we had was that at that point we were offering the mentoring program, the challenges, so some experience-based training programs, consultations, events, etc. And a lot of the different things were run on different platforms and tools. So it was very important for us to unify the experience, and this is why we decided to scrape once again, leave Circle, rebuild our infrastructure on Webflow, and basically unify the experience of all of our participants and create our own educational system.
Now, we built our micro MVP, we expanded it with a spider web. As with any product, as it grows, as it expands, at some point, well, it gets complex. There's complexity just grows by definition, and technical debt also creeps in. This is, I guess, normal. And that's not different for any of the no-code products out there, and for sure it's not different for our no-code product. The limitations or the consequences of that are a little bit different, and that's something that we are very aware of. It has caused fuck-ups, it has caused some very bad stomach aches, but it's just something that we have learned to live with, to manage ahead, to laugh about, and yeah, to take into consideration. Just to give you an example of what I mean, not to keep it so theoretical. So when we started, we tried to keep it simple, as you know. So when we started our challenges, so this educational practice programs, let's say, every new cohort had one Airtable project. Very nice, the data was confined. Let's say it was nice little bubbles that were all operating by themselves. New cohort, new Airtable project. But at the same time, why did we want to use no-code tools? We wanted to use them so that we can use them across different use cases. We could really use the synergies across everything we do. We don't want to do any manual setting up of new things, again, if we're using no-code tools. So we decided to move to one big Airtable project, which is great. Now we have all of our automations and all of our kind of user data, all of that stuff is in one place, all of our cohorts. But this, of course, means that complexity is also much bigger. And here, one of the, I think, downsides of no-code is that you have a little bit of a less documentation about your project. You can introduce it, but generally it's not so easy. And you are mostly testing on production, which, as we know, can lead to some funny situations that happen to the best of us. Some unnamed bank, Polish bank, had some very curious case some year ago. Maybe you remember where you might have gotten a funny text message because somebody was testing on production. So it's not just to us small ponds in the fish, that small fish in the pond, that these issues happen, but this is definitely one of the limitations with no code, because you're testing on production, because you do have these intercomplexities that are not so well documented, that fuck-ups do happen. We once sent out 1,000 emails by mistake. These emails definitely should not have been sent out. I felt very bad after this. World was ending. Now it's up here, we can laugh about it. Nothing happened. And this is also when we have any new launch, any new bigger feature going up, we're always saying, okay, let's prepare for those fuck-ups. We tested with some test records, which we cannot test on a test setting. So let's see what's going to happen. Fuck-ups are part of the journey, and that's part of what we learned.
So again, it's very important to brace yourself for that, but also embrace what it happens. And worst comes to worst, you always have a funny story to say or to tell or to share with whoever you wish. I'm sure we have more than this one, but let's say this is the one that you're getting today. One bonus tip and element that I would also like to drive your attention to is about having external help. And why I'm saying that is because we're designers. We're used to doing things. Like, we want making things happen. And usually we're more doers than, let's say, asking someone else or delegating the things. But at some point, as you're growing your product, if this is something that interests you, as you're increasing the offering, the smartest thing you can do is to actually pick your battles in terms of different areas of responsibility, initiatives you might drive, and actually think if there's maybe someone out there that could help you do it in a more efficient way or maybe quicker, just to be mindful of your resources. And it's definitely something not to be completely, let's say, against for. So as an example, we partner up at some point with two great companies that we would like to give a shout out. It's Flying Business and Victuro. And we work together on what we like to call our 25th iteration on Webflow, on how we're presenting our product offering in order basically to make it more clear to our audience, and again, to have another and better version of the products we were doing. So regardless if you're gonna go and do it alone, if you're gonna gather some small team, if you're doing it as part of a company, or if you're trying to get also some help for other experts, as with the design process and product building, is the same with no coding. The process is never done.
So, as Ola said, it's been a process for us. It's been a learning process. It's been a process of fuck-ups, as you heard. It's been a process of successes, of non-successes. And over this 5 years of working with these tools, we have found the things that work for us, or that we like to go by, and that we have summarized for you in these 10 tips, plus the bonus, that we shared with you today. And that, again, they're not just here because we needed to make a nice presentation to, package it into 10 tips. These are really things that we are practicing on a daily basis to help us building our product one iteration at a time. Sorry, no coding our product one iteration at a time.
So as the saying goes, it's very important to do what you preach. Here today, we're actually preaching what we're doing. And as we went through the examples, you probably noticed that we focused more on the entrepreneurial path. And maybe you're sitting here and thinking, okay, I'm a designer, but I'm not really interested in starting a business, or I don't have an idea for a product, or I don't really want to have a side hustle. What's in it for me? And the one thing I can definitely share from my experience or my journey over the last 10 years of being the designer, 5 years of working with no-code, is that the knowledge of these tools, the automation, the process I went through definitely helped me become a better designer. First of all, in understanding all the opportunities and advantages I can leverage, take, use, advise in order to build products or how to design for certain interactions and user experience. Second of all, that was the case that if you're thinking about freelancing or expanding your product offering, is also a great way to start delivering end-to-end solutions, basically, to our clients. And I have to admit that for me, that was a great joy, not having to hand off my design and hope for the best, whatever is going to happen later, but actually have a lot of influence on how it's done and how it's going to be presented to the world and work. And again, you don't have to become an expert overnight. Maybe you don't even need to be a website developer. You don't have to master. You don't have to get all the certificates. But I do encourage you to look into it, to start with a first step, to take advantage of all the amazing free resources that are out there. You really don't have to pay for courses that will teach you every single tool, because most of them have really amazing content available to you. You can go to Webflow University, you can start with Make Academy, Airtable Academy, and other tools available, not even mentioning the power of YouTube that is out there. But the things I want to say, and of course it's very personal, but it's definitely a message I stand strongly by, is that for me, no-code is the next big wave. And there are many people that want to surf it, and there are many people that are already on the wave. So the message I would like to leave you with is basically to take the opportunity, not to miss out on being a part of it, and basically go and make things happen.
If you would like to learn those tools as part of more of a community, or you would rather really learn how to not use just tools and functionalities, but you want to learn how to build a system of functionalities, we do invite you to the next No Code Makers program, which is starting in October, on the 29th of October, where well, you can learn all those things and maybe surf the wave with us as big fans of no code.
And as we mentioned, we're always working on creating your own ideas. So if you have a certain project you would like to work with, you would like to work with us or learn with us, and also the community, you can combine. And as a bonus, we also have a special discount for the WaysConf community. But regardless of the choices you're going to make, we keep fingers crossed for your no-code journey, and hopefully we got you interested in the topic.
Thank you, and we're open for questions.
Sure. Yeah, unfortunately, we have only 2 mics, but we in no-code community know how to deal with stuff even with small resources. So that was a great presentation. I think that the thing that we used to say, or my business partner used to say, if you're proud of your product that you launch or your MVP, you launch it too late. So this is the main thing. You're kind of analyzing, checking if there's a customers for that, if there's
Being
users.
embarrassed.
Exactly, you can be embarrassed, you know, it's not, obviously probably designers are cringed about those kinds of statements, but still this is how we do it in no-code. Great presentation. So right now we have time for Q&A session, so if you have questions for Natalie and Aleksandra, you can raise your hand. We have also app, but I didn't tell about how to, you know, ask questions using the WaysConf app. So if anyone have a question, raise your hand, I'm gonna give you a mic. Anyone? Oh yeah, I see one gentleman, I think. Oh yeah.
Hi, hello. Thanks for the presentation. My question is, how do you choose the no-code tools among like multiple resources that are out there? And like, what is the process of actually choosing, like assessing which is the best? So that's one question. And the other, how do you manage if you have those tools already? chosen? How do you manage if, for example, one of the tools raises prices, the subscription model changes, all that stuff? So that's interesting for me. Thanks.
You want to start with the first one?
So to answer your first question, I think it depends. I think two things that how we approach it at least is to first, of course, look at, or the question is how do you choose a tool, right? And the first thing is like, okay, what are we trying to solve here? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And that's already a first way in which to narrow down the tools. You saw, of course, our kind of go-to tech stack. This is something that is not just something we came up with just out of nowhere. There are certain industry standards for certain kind of tools. And I would actually really recommend to these kind of aggregator sites or even putting like a simple Google search, this is what I want to do, what are the most recommended tools. That's the first step. But then in our experience, there's a big part of preference as well. So of course, what do you want to solve? But then the next thing is like, how do you like to solve those those problems? What are you stronger in? So we're talking about our team and that we are all no-code experts, let's say, but each of us has our preferences. Alexander's definitely more on the front-facing. I'm definitely more on the back-facing. So we might have a problem which Alexander might choose to solve with Webflow, while I will choose to solve it with Airtable. So and then it's a bit of a triangulation of these two elements and kind of choosing. And I think the last step is just go for it in the sense like, okay, you've done your research, and then I think you will only know, or we will only ever found out once we actually try to use a tool. And it has happened that we've tried around with a tool and we're like, not working, or that implementation is not working, let's roll back and use something else.
Or there might also be a situation that certain tools came to the market that we're testing out and see if they're actually serving our needs better or if they might be in any way more efficient. And just to go back to your second question, as a reminder, you've asked, if I remember correctly, how do we deal with rising prices of certain tools and elements? And of course, especially in the beginning, one of the factors or one of the things that we're taking under consideration was weighing, let's say, the price benefit elements. This is one of the examples, as we've shown today. We didn't went for certain solutions because we deemed them as too expensive. But it's also the matter of, again, preferences, but also resources. And the time you want to involve, or let me rephrase it, preferences, period. As an example, we have our infrastructure on Webflow. And to be honest, even if Webflow have recently increased their prices, this is not something that we would move away from, given the fact how many functionalities and needs it serves for us and how great of a tool it is. And I think another great example is MailChimp, that although it's really expensive, and especially in comparison to SendGrid, and I have to admit we are trying to ditch it 4 or 5 times to just move away from MailChimp and not pay for it. We actually end up coming back to it every single time because it does solve for us the problem, let's say, or the challenge of marketing in a great way and in a way that really is very preferable by us, beneficial to us, just easier. And this is why we decided to go for the costs.
So if you were to connect those two parts, like price in the end for us is a part of the matrix of what we're looking for. And sometimes we're willing to pay a bit more, or even if the price increases, we're like, okay, we still get so much out of it, it's fine. And sometimes we move away from it because we say like, okay, it's not worth it. Or we start with a tool like, okay, it's good enough for now, and then we move to something cheaper.
But if you're thinking as an example, just to quickly add to it, because a lot of people are asking about Webflow, do I need to pay for Webflow? Do I need to have the freelance package, etc.? It depends on what is that you want to do, because if you want to have just a simple, I don't know, one-pager or a simple portfolio page, maybe it's worth going into Framer as an example and just set it up with Framer. But if you're doing a more advanced, let's say, design for your client, and also Webflow is the standard in the industry, maybe it's worth to have it, and of course then add it to the price of the product you're delivering.
Any other questions?
Yeah, some sports. Awesome.
Thanks for the presentation. It was super interesting. There was one point that caught my attention when you were talking about redesigning the website with Webflow. I'm curious how you guys have found the compatibility with using no-code websites like Webflow, their compatibility with Google in terms of, you know, driving traffic to the website and actually turning that into a source of lead generation.
I mean, let's just say not ideal, to say the least. And we did run into certain problems flagged to us very gladly by our marketing team. Maybe this is also one of the reasons we stick with MailChimp. We're basically just making it up, let's say, using different channels and different tools. But for us at that stage, it really wasn't that big of a problem.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have time for only one quick question.
Here's a question.
Yeah, one quick question.
Thank you. Hi. It's a really, really great talk. I have a question about the integration of Webflow and the tool that you mentioned to keep the community together. What was it? The circle? Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. How did you manage to keep the community inside a no-code tool like Webflow? I mean, the conversations and everything is happening there, or how does it work?
We didn't. So when we moved away from Circle, actually the community aspect, and what we mean community aspect actually on Circle was to have commenting function and like being able to interact with each other. That's one of the things we resigned from when we moved to Webflow. For the reason that at that point, other parts were simply more important for us. And actually, we realized that because we also use Slack for a more direct kind of community, and we saw that that actually worked better. So we said we resigned from the Circle part of community to move to Webflow because the unification was more important, and we saw that the community aspect was working better somewhere else. So again, it was a kind of what's the most important thing for us.
But again, if this is something that's really important to you, there are different options of embedding and showcasing it as part of, let's say, your own infrastructure within Webflow, just by hosting a different tool in this sense. I see you. I know that we are out of time for questions, so the only thing I wanted to say, if someone wants to chat, we'll be here all day, so feel free to approach us and ask questions or just say hi.
And if you liked our talk, vote for us. So thank you.
Thank you.